We have breaking news right now. A jury has convicted the man accused of shoving and killing an 84-year-old man, Vicha Ratanapakdee, of involuntary manslaughter.
So if you ever wanted a perfect example of what a lie by omission actually is, that sentence is a perfect distillation of the concept. You just heard from the local ABC affiliate over in the Bay Area that Antoine Watson, the man who ran up and violently shoved an 84-year-old Asian man to the ground, killing him, was convicted by a jury of his peers, when in reality, in actuality, Antoine Watson won this case, because what you ultimately end up finding out seconds later is that he was not convicted of the high charges of first-degree nor second-degree murder. He was actually only convicted of involuntary manslaughter, found not guilty on elder abuse, by the way, as he attacked an 84-year-old man in the streets, killing him, which is also insane. And because he was convicted of only involuntary manslaughter, it is very likely that Antoine Watson will only get a time served as a sentence for this, meaning that he will be out, because guess what? This trial took 5 years. This was from back in the day when they were doing the Stop Asian Hate thing, and guess what? This perfect example of a random elderly Asian person being targeted and murdered goes unpunished. Essentially, Antoine Watson gets away with it, and the reason for that is because he's such an innocent Baba Angel Aladdin who only ran up and shoved that man in order to feed his starving family, or some other ridiculous, absurd explanation, which, by the way, we will get into throughout the course of this video. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
San Francisco Assistant District Attorney Dane Reinstedt began the prosecution's closing arguments by talking to the jury about the legal definition of murder and why prosecutors are arguing that's the charge that fits this crime.
Antoine Watson was also found guilty of force, likely to produce great bodily harm. However, he was found not guilty of murder in the first or second degree. You might remember, it was 5 years ago this month that Grandpa Vicha was attacked in San Francisco's Anza Vista neighborhood. Surveillance video shows Watson running and then pushing Vicha to the ground. He struck his head and died days later. Watson was 19 years old at the time and testified he didn't call 911 because he was scared the police would arrest him and panicked. Vicha's death became one of the flashpoints in the Stop Asian Hate movement during the pandemic.
So it's very important for you guys to understand that the American legal system can be quite complicated. It can be difficult to assess when a homicide occurs, what category that homicide needs to actually be put in. Should it be a murder charge? First degree or second degree, there are different standards for those. Should it be a manslaughter? Maybe an aggravated or voluntary manslaughter? Again, these are all things that often get debated by juries across the nation, and not every case is crystal clear. Not every case is clear cut, but in this particular case, none of those ambiguities actually exist. When you actually hear the evidence that was presented throughout the course of this trial, the fact that this was caught on video from start to finish, the motivation that Antoine Watson had to run up and charge an 84-year-old man, shove him to the ground to his death, and then take off, you understand 100% that this is a clear and unambiguous case of murder. Antoine Watson should have been found guilty. However, a San Francisco jury decided that his excuse making must be good enough, because you know what? Can you really expect a young black man not to attack an elderly Asian person? Can you really expect him to feel judged and not lash out violently and kill someone? And if you think I'm joking about that, if you think that I am playing a little bit fast and loose with the facts as they were presented at trial, I am absolutely not, because guess what? Antoine Watson testified at this trial, but before we get to that testimony where he says his rationale for committing this murder, I want you guys to understand the surveillance videos, because it was not disputed at any point at trial that Antoine Watson did in fact kill the 84-year-old victim in this particular case. What was disputed was the motivation, whether or not he had malice in his heart when he decided to murder this person, and all these other things, again, that the defense attorney brilliantly tried to hide behind in order to avoid the actual result that should have been delivered by a jury of his peers. Let us get into the clips so you can understand how dead to rights this individual actually was.
This is a case where both sides agree the defendant killed the victim. Antoine Watson even admitted it on the stand. Investigators pieced together several neighborhood security camera videos showing him sprinting down the street from his parked car and then directly at 84-year-old Vicha Ratanapakdee. What the jury will have to decide is if Watson maliciously attacked Ratanapakdee and also knew or should have known he could seriously harm or kill him.
So look, there is a viral video attached to this particular homicide where you can actually see the suspect run up to the victim, shove him down in an incredibly violent way, and then take off. But what we find out throughout the course of this trial is that prior to this guy was building up speed, running from his parked car, targeting this person in particular. And the reason we know that is because there was a witness that actually heard what was being said prior to the attack. And by the way, when I say heard what was being said, I mean by Antoine Watson. The 84-year-old man had absolutely no part in his own murder, despite the fact that for some reason he wasn't actually able to be valued enough to secure a homicide conviction in this particular case, or at least a murder conviction. It was only involuntary manslaughter. It was just an accident that he ran a full block up the street at full speed into this 84-year-old man. But let us hear what that witness had to say.
During the trial, a neighbor did testify that he heard Watson yell, "What the blank are you looking at?" before he ran at Ratanapakdee.
So yeah, a neighbor ended up hearing this man yell, "What the F are you looking at?" Again, the crime of looking at an innocent Beba Angel black person, before he took off full speed, estimated to be 12 miles per hour on foot, and then charged into him with all that force. Remember, again, another requirement for at least a second-degree homicide conviction is that Watson needed to know what he was doing was dangerous, he needed to have malice while he was doing it, and he needed to understand that this could have led to serious injury, great bodily harm, and or death. That is something that he should have known, even if he was too stupid to know it. It's something that a regular, ordinary, rational person of reasonable intelligence should know in that situation in order to secure a conviction. So to me, already, that's enough. But to make matters worse, Antoine Watson testified in his own defense, and he offered another explanation for this attack.
And on the stand, Watson himself testified that he thought the 84-year-old was judging him just before the attack. Prosecutor Reinstad argued to the jurors today that is malice towards the victim.
Yeah, you just heard that. The defendant in this particular case testified in his own defense, and in that testimony, he said that he felt like the 84-year-old man was judging him. He was judging him possibly based on the color of his skin, and possibly he was worried and afraid of a young black man that was very upset with him for indiscernible reasons, so he decided to respond to that judgment, that prejudgment, evil white racism possibly, or evil Asian racism, because the victim in this case was in fact an Asian man, by running full sprint a full block and attacking him, again unprovoked except by the perception that he was being judged. And this was not a murder conviction. This was an involuntary manslaughter conviction that could see this man released instantly. Like when they do the sentencing hearing at the end of the month, Antoine Watson could be out on the streets, and God forbid he feel like an elderly person may be judging him, because guess what? That is a perfect license for him to initiate an attack.
What will happen next is that Mr. Watson will be released from custody because an involuntary manslaughter only carries a possible 4-year sentence. So he's clearly done his time, and he should be released very quickly.
And by the way, it's absolutely shameful that this took like 5 years for this to be adjudicated in a court of law.
But for family of the victim, the years leading up to this have been painful.
After 5 years, it's been a long time for the trial, justice delay, justice denied,
This should have been resolved relatively quickly. A lot of people are pointing out that the man who broke into Nancy Pelosi's house ended up getting life in prison within that year, which again is justified. He attacked Paul Pelosi. It was an absolutely disgusting and reprehensible act. But in this particular case, you have justice delayed for 5 years, and then injustice when the jury says, oh, well, you can't expect a young black man to not run full speed into an elderly Asian person and kill him. What are you trying to do? Enforce evil white racism? This guy needs to be out so he can get his $5 million reparations check, because the system is just so hard for a young black man. I mean, they want to prosecute this guy for running at an elderly Asian man full speed, shoving him to the ground in a violent manner. Again, a video so violent, I can't even show you what happens to the Asian man, because, oh my God, that would just be injustice for our society.
Defense attorney Anita Naba began her closing statement by telling jurors the prosecution did not meet its burden of proof. She says testimony from two of the prosecution's own witnesses described Watson's erratic behavior before and after the attack. Naba argued her client did not intend to kill Ratanapakdee and didn't maliciously target him.
Now, of course, everybody is entitled to a defense, and I do applaud the attorney on the defense side for actually being able to argue this case out in a court of law to a successful outcome from that point of view. But the fact is, the idea that he was erratic prior to this, that he's been crazy and is a serious ongoing threat to society just on his own, therefore you can't prove intent because he's absolutely crazy and he could have attacked anybody at any point in time, and thus we need to release him back onto the streets, is an absurd, asinine, ridiculous argument that, again, only could work on a San Francisco jury. Only the most left-wing places in the entire nation could say, this guy targeted this Asian man in particular. He said, what the F are you looking at? He said his motivation was that he felt judged in his little bebe heart, and then he ran full speed, again, according to the expert witnesses, at about 12 miles an hour, hit this man, full contact, ended up killing him, and that means it's just his erratic behavior, and thus he needs to rejoin society. Again, we're never going to get into a situation where Antoine Watson randomly feels judged by an elderly person, and this happens again, so there's really no danger at all whatsoever of this occurring. It's ridiculous, it's insane, and again, he could be released so soon. By the end of this month, this man could be out on the streets to attack again.
Not guilty of murder in the first or second degree, and not guilty of elder abuse. I spoke with the victim's daughter right after court. I wonder what you think about what happened.
Yes, I am just painful and disappointed about the verdict. It's not for the murder and the elder's abuse. Yeah, my father was 84 years old who walked on the street on his morning walk in the morning. It should be, but with respect for the verdict from the jury, yeah.
So look, obviously the family is distraught and deservedly so. This was a denial of justice, an absolutely ridiculous outcome for this particular case. It's shameful in every possible way, but we shouldn't be surprised by this because if you guys will remember, I did a video way back in the day on The Real and them reacting to the anti-Asian hate, and they basically did half the segment about how Asians are not cool enough to black people, and it's kind of their fault that they're being attacked by black people.
But this brings up a bigger issue that we haven't spoken about, and it's something that I've had conversations with in my family and within our different sectors of our communities of Asians, but we haven't spoken on a bigger spectrum, and I really want to bring attention to this. And it's especially when I saw that 2020 really highlighted how much white supremacy still exists and how much it hurts the black community. It's dangerous to our community when it comes to protecting our black brothers and sisters. But the problem is white supremacy not only feeds off of destroying the allyship with black communities, but it also targets homophobia and hate against Asians and xenophobia. And that, to me, is the problem that we have to now look at anti-blackness within our Asian community as well. There is an unspoken tension between Asian and blacks. I've heard it in my family. I've seen it within different communities. Really? It exists, and it actually has a lot of resentment and a lot of pain that requires healing. With this rise of these attacks, what I'm hearing in the circles of my community from my phone calls, from different Asian entrepreneurs and business owners is we've got to increase the policing against black people. We've got to now watch out for black people. We've got to, whether it requires more security or maybe protecting more of the goods. I have a hair shop owner who says, now I think I have to go put all of my black bundles of hair products and weaves back inside of plastic containers and lock them down. And I'm like, no, that's not the answer. The increasing policing and increasing this stereotyping and stigma that black people are dangerous is not going to help the overall problem that we do have anti-blackness within our Asian communities, and we need to stop it by opening the conversations. We need to condemn having those type of thought processes in our families. Anybody who's Asian out there and have businesses and people within your family members and neighborhoods that are now afraid, they cannot be targeting black people and cannot be having these racist comments that are going to increase the anti-blackness that we've had already for generations.
And this is a growing sentiment among the left wing. As you guys know, they always deem Asians to be white when it's convenient in a similar way that they do to other groups. And in this particular case with a black perpetrator, obviously they didn't want to charge that guy with a hate crime. So despite the family pressing for that, and this being in the fervor of the Stop Asian Hate movement, he was not charged with a hate crime. Again, they were able to to avoid an elder abuse conviction. The victim was 84 years old. How the hell could you not prove that? How the hell could you not prove that this was an assault on a vulnerable person in the city of San Francisco when I believe the cutoff for that is age 65, and he was 20 years plus that particular age? I mean, this elderly man could be 89 years old if he survived. Unfortunately, he was put in a coma by Antoine Watson, and he died a couple of days later, and the family has to pick up the pieces because they had an Asian relative in San Francisco who thought it would be nice to walk in his neighborhood, and unfortunately, Antoine Watson felt judged, maybe the Asian man, guilty of a hate crime, prejudging what an evil white racist Asian man, and he needed to resolve that by attacking him violently. Again, disgusting, shameful, and ridiculous. Unsurprising from San Francisco, where left-wing trash goes to fester. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the absolute madness of this San Francisco case. Till next time.